give the floor now to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас.
Thank you, President. We are grateful to Mr. Voronkov and Ms. Konings for their detailed analyses of the situation of the fight against ISIL. We'd also like to express our support for the work of the structures that they head up. We'd also like to thank Mr. Moriarden, our longtime friend, for his comprehensive and emotional but sobering and extremely pertinent briefing. Today, the attention of the international community is glued to the situation in Afghanistan. Of course, when discussing counter-terrorism, we can't sidestep the situation in that country. It would appear that following the tragic events of 9/11, for 20 years, Afghanistan was full of American and NATO forces, trainers and advisors. The official aim of their presence there was to fight terrorism and train Afghan national security forces to this end too. For this, colossal human and financial resources were deployed. What became of this assistance and presence? No sooner did foreign assistance support leave, 20 years of efforts were wiped out. All of this for nothing. No one wanted to, or even indeed no one seemed able to fight for the values and interests inculcated of foreign powers. Has Afghanistan ceased to be a source of terrorist and narcotic threats? Of course not. But dealing with this will now be the job of the new Afghan authorities and the neighbours of Afghanistan. Following the withdrawal of Western contingents, Afghan citizens have been facing an ever greater pile of problems. I'd like to underscore that the Russian Federation will cooperate only with those political forces in Afghanistan who have no ties to terrorists, ISIL, Al-Qaeda and affiliated groups. We trust that all Afghan parties will refrain from violence and will assist in resolving the situation peacefully. President, thanks to consistent efforts of Russian and Syrian forces in recent years, we've managed to substantially weaken the terrorist organizations operating in Syria, particularly ISIL. At the same time, some terrorist cells continue their activities and still pose a serious threat. The most numerous remains the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formed on the basis of Jabhat al-Nusra. But according to various assessments, there are between 10 and 15,000 of them. The fight against this terrorist organization is being made more difficult by attempts to present them as some kind of political opposition. One other terrorist organization that continues to pose a threat is Huras ad-Din, a branch of Al-Qaeda in Syria. According to various sources, there are between 3,500 and 5,000 of them. Half of them are foreign terrorist fighters. On our side, we continue to provide the necessary assistance to the Syrian authorities to counter terrorism. Of concern also is what's happening in other regions of the world. ISIL is spreading their influence in Africa. Their regional branches are strengthening their autonomy too, particularly in Western Africa and the Sahel, as well as Eastern and Central Africa. President, I'd like to once again set forth the Russian position on the issue of return of foreign terrorist fighters. We support the irreversible punishment of them for terrorist crimes and of pooling efforts of the whole international community to this end. In line with international obligations, foreign terrorist fighters affiliated with terrorist activities should be repatriated to their country of origin, where they should be held accountable to a level commensurate to the gravity of their crimes. Or these people should be tried in the place where the crime was committed, in line with national law of the relevant state. It is this cooperation with the legitimate authorities of the countries where the fighters are located that is the key to addressing the manifold problems linked to foreign terrorist fighters and their members of their families. Recently, we've seen active spread of terrorist ideology of ISIL amongst children in cyberspace. We call on member states to carry out relevant work on prevention and de-radicalization amongst this extremely vulnerable category of population. President, we can't ignore the human rights aspects of the fight against terrorism either. Speaking out in support of human rights and gender aspects is insufficient. The international community needs to see results. Once again, we must raise the question of the operation of the Guantanamo prison. On many occasions, we've heard high-ranking American officials say that they intend to close this facility, notorious for detaining people without trial or investigation, as well as for the torture, inhumane and degrading treatment of prisoners. We also expect from our Western colleagues to consistently fulfill their international legal obligations, which guarantee, inter alia, by the Refugee Convention, the Convention Against Torture, and other fundamental international treaties. These obligations are particularly relevant in a context of the growing mass exodus of people from conflict zones. The fight against terrorism is our common job. We'd call for cooperation on this. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement.